Okay, well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for the first of our Start Something series. This entire series is the Entrepreneur's Toolkit, and we will get started here today. Just a couple things real quick. If you'd please make sure that you are on mute, stay on mute the entire time. Use the chat box to ask any questions or if you have anything to share. And we will be recording this and then sharing on YouTube. And the link to that will be sent to you, and it's also available through the JPEG website. All right, we will get started here. So today we have Peter Hong joining us, and we'll be talking about I have an idea. Now, what are my next steps? Peter is the director of Iowa State's Startup Factory. Peter, thank you for joining us. And you want to give us a little bit about your background and the Startup Factory and how you help entrepreneurs.
Sure, Jean. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And my work history goes way back even before what's here on the screen in the manufacturing arena. I started my career at John Deere, did many different engineering positions. And then I moved to a smaller company, which we eventually took public, did the mergers and acquisitions, and was in the process of running and then eventually owning one of those divisions during the late 2000s. And then I moved then to the central Iowa area after having, relocating from Northwest Iowa, and started really working very intensely with entrepreneurs. I work in several different areas. One is with SBIR grant recipients, those people who get their grants from, let's say, USDA or NASA or NOAA or DOE, and I help them develop their commercialization plans. So very much what we're talking about today. I also work very closely with the state of Iowa on the Innovation Council, helping develop the ecosystem in our state, putting together what we needed. And now, as of last February, just a little over a year ago, I bring all of those skills and talents to the Startup Factory. And hopefully, if I can help you, I will do so.
Great, thank you. So moving along here. Today, we're going to be talking about, as we had said, I have an idea what's next, which will include customer discovery and idea validation. Our upcoming sessions, which will be each Wednesday for the next 5 weeks after today, we'll be covering other topics such as startup costs, strategic planning, sustaining a business. If you haven't registered for those yet, please make sure you do so on our website, or you can use the QR code listed here. So, Peter, first I want to ask everybody that's participating today, can you do a little hand wave to let me know, do you have a business idea that you're thinking about right now? And that's why you're listening to this session, just to get a feel for how many people already have ideas that they're working with. We'll just give this a couple seconds. So Peter, it looks like we have quite a few attendees that have some kind of business idea that they're working with. As a director of the Startup Factory, what would you tell your cohorts about the next steps once they have an idea?
So developing your idea, which is very close and passionate to you, is really just the first step. And, oftentimes what we forget is that, the ultimate goal here is obviously you need to make some money in order to validate your idea. You need to really think about who's going to pay me something, even if you are just saying, I want to be a nonprofit, who's going to benefit from what you have, what your idea is built on, based on. Because oftentimes we talk to friends and family and they say, oh, they're very encouraging, and yes, that's a great idea. But then that's really where the work starts. So customer discovery, which we'll get into a little bit, is really the first step. It's really about validating what it is that you feel, your hypothesis, as it were, what it addresses. What pain points do the people that you potentially are going to call customers, what do they see? How do they feel about it? But we're never at that point where we're selling. So really, customer discovery as a term is maybe slightly incorrect, in the sense that we really want to look at the market as a whole. So that's really what we're going to be doing and talking about when we talk about customer discovery. It's thinking about, how does my idea meet the market need, and whether you're talking about something that you're going to do on Main Street or something you're going to blow up to a billion-dollar company, it all has to be something that is driven by potential customers.
So Peter, I guess I was always under the impression that I had this a little bit backwards, in that we wanted to validate our ideas, kind of know what we're thinking about wanting to do or sell before doing customer discovery. So understanding what our product is before figuring out who our customers are. But what you're saying is we should actually be doing customer discovery first.
Yeah, and that's really, Gene, what we were talking about, the comment about customer discovery is a term that we all use. It's something that's much broader than the specific person or organizations that might pay you for your product or service. Really, what we're talking about in looking at that is, how do I understand how my product or service meets a need? But the only way you can understand those needs is by being very open, by not leading in the questions that you ask, and really letting that audience, those people who will respond to your inquiries, let them talk. So really, customer discovery is one of those things where we're looking for like minds, but we're not, hopefully, leading them to the conclusions that we've already made in our own minds about the value and that you have in the product or service that you're trying to bring to the market.
Thank you. So if I'm introverted, which I am, and nervous about doing cold calls and reaching out to people, how else can I prepare for customer discovery?
So that's a question that often comes up, particularly in the startup factory, is when you're a technical person. I started out as a mechanical engineer out of college and was very introverted. And I will tell you that it was not comfortable to make a cold call or even ask a question of somebody that maybe that I knew that might seem to be, somewhat personal. But the fact of the matter is that you can do a lot, and you should do a lot as a first step on the internet. I mean, thank goodness today we have the internet. You can do a lot of what we call desktop discovery. There are many people out there, as you know, who will give you their personal opinions. They do it on social media in particular. They do it in reviews on other products and services that might be similar to what you're thinking about, only yours is a better version of that. And looking through and seeing even what the social trends are. Because eventually, that when you take it to the market, that if you want your company to exist for many years beyond when you actually launch, that the potential customer base will be changing, just as all things change. So again, looking at all those things on social media, all the things on the internet, doing very simple Google searches will help you. If you're on LinkedIn, you can also do some LinkedIn searches and many, many others.
So can you explain a little bit of what I'd be searching for and how this is going to be helping me in my customer discovery?
Absolutely. The idea here is that if you believe, and you do, that your idea addresses a specific problem, okay, how prevalent is that problem, first of all? Can you determine through conversation, through desktop discovery, many people saying, hey, I have the same problem. And so you all of a sudden you have the opportunity then to start thinking about just exactly who is it that possibly would be a customer, as we in the term, the person that's actually buying your product or service. Now, that means then, of course, you need to look across all the demographics, at least as many as you can find. Is this for a younger generation? Is this for parents? Is this for those in their retirement or in the leading different groups, perhaps? And so anything that you can subdivide that large potential market will help you, particularly as you start thinking about later, oh, how do I going to market this? How would I advertise what it is that I have, and how do I attract that audience? So not only do you want to find out, is my product or service meeting a need, in other words, addressing something that we call a pain point for someone, but you also want to know who that target market looks like and what is their profile.
Great, thank you. What, doing all this customer discovery, what should we be uncovering?
So, in looking at what is it that we want to get? Well, first of all, if you're doing desktop discovery, of course, you can look for specific things. You can look at how much money do people spend on their pets, for instance. What does that market look like? And there are many, many studies that are out there, marketing studies that you can tap into. If you go to a research section of a library, you certainly can find those. And those will be validated by surveys that are independently done, that have lots and lots of trend data, et cetera. But if you're doing cold calls or even referrals, what we call warm contacts, where someone has introduced you to another person, and then they're willing to talk to you about it, let them talk about what they feel are the obstacles surrounding what your product or service addresses. So in other words, if you have a product, let's say, and it does a better job of something that, let's say, I do every day. Maybe it has to do with, and a lot of what we see of people remaking apps and software to say it does a better job, it does it more inclusively. Well, what you want to find out is from potential customers is, are you satisfied? Do you have problems with what you're currently using? Are there any issues that you wish it would do? And you may find that it actually does prove that you're correct in your assumptions, or it may prove that maybe there's something slightly different that you haven't thought of that you could do at this early stage in the development of your product or service. And the question of how much will somebody pay for it, that's one that's a little ticklish, because many times our cohort members will come and say, gee, it costs me $10 to manufacture this, and I think a fair price might be $20. But what it doesn't take into account is is that truly matching the pain that the person has? So when you be careful when you talk about if you get to that stage, how much would you pay for a solution that addresses this pain point that you have? Because oftentimes people do not really have an idea. Customers will either give you a very, very low number, which doesn't really help you, or they just don't really know. And so they will just pick something out of the air.
I imagine them also sharing a very high number won't help you either, because it may set your expectations somewhere where they weren't, and it may not be realistic, right?
That's true, Jane. Oftentimes that happens, and people throw it out there hypothetically to get a reaction from you. And so you can take it with a grain of salt and do your comparative analysis when you look at the competition and see just exactly what people are willing to pay for a particular product or service.
During all this questioning, do I need to be worried about demographics? Do I need to be tracking that?
You really should, and really, we always suggest in customer discovery at our level, where researchers and innovators have come with, again, like you, an idea, but really haven't thought too much about how to get it to a commercial state. We often tell them, one of the best ways to do this is to be listening all the time, which means you don't have a lot of time to take a lot of notes. So what I would be suggesting to all of you is make a little spreadsheet, something you can just put check boxes on, have the specific points that you'd love to get out of someone, not that you'll get every one of them always, but be able to then check off on those boxes through conversation. You really don't want to make people feel like they're filling out just another questionnaire, because they will turn off. But what you do want is you want to ask and invest in that person. It's the psychology of really people love to talk about themselves. They love to talk about their problems, and when given the opportunity, especially if you're open to listening. And so you don't want to be taking a lot of notes like you would be in a lecture. What you want to do is be able to remember what you heard, quickly write it down at the end of the conversation and or during the conversation.
Great, thank you. So while I'm doing this customer discovery, am I pitching my idea? Am I kind of saying what my idea is and how I think it's going to work, and then ask a bunch of questions?
Yeah, that's the number one cardinal sin, if there is such a thing, of customer discovery. You really don't want to do that. You're not selling at this point. At this point, it's an idea that you have, and you have built a business thesis or a hypothesis about it, and you want to use the opportunity to make sure that the environment that your potential customers are in, that it really makes sense to them, and that you're addressing those pain points again that they have within that environment. So never try to sell the product at this stage. There'll be plenty of time to do that. There'll be plenty of time for you to ask straight up questions in focus group opportunities, etc. But at this stage, really keep it very general and allow for you to have a better understanding of the world in which your potential customers live in.
I guess, how do we make sure that we are talking the same terminology that our customers understand and relate to?
That's a good question. If you get into what I call technical jargon, which many of our cohort members do actually, because that's their comfort zone, and it may be yours as well. And it doesn't have to be highly technical. It could be just terms and concepts that are unique to your particular industry that you're working on or addressing. We have to be very, very, very general. So painting pictures that people can relate to using your words is very important. Not getting them so involved that you have to explain what does this term mean, what does that term mean, because one of two things will happen. One is they will just not address it because they don't understand the question, and two, they will quickly recognize that you're doing more than what we call basic customer discovery, the foundational part of deciding, do I have a business going forward or not? So just be very careful. If you can put it on the level of, we always tell our cohort members, put it on the level of a fifth grader. That's not to be demeaning to fifth graders or anybody else. What it means is we don't want to get tied up again in the terminology, in the jargon that surrounds your particular industry.
Right. And then how is it, would you say, or how important is it to find other people that you can talk to? Is coming out and asking the current customer you're talking to, do you have anybody else I could talk to about this, beneficial?
That is exactly how you do it, Jane. That is exactly it. Warm introductions are always easier. Anyone that is willing to recommend someone, and then you can use their name as a reference, that's always the best thing that you can do. Now, does that mean that there aren't going to be some cold calls? No, you do have to do some cold calling. The opportunity, however, to do that, once you've established a rapport with that particular person, it's very important then to say, I value your time, your opinions, and your input, and thank you so much. Is there anyone else that you might be willing to tell me or introduce me to that could give me their opinions about this particular subject? And many times that will happen. And if you're going to say perhaps a large company, and let's say you're talking to someone who's a real end user, they may actually say to you, from an end user standpoint, yeah, this really is a pain for me, and we would love to have a solution to this problem, but I don't know if, let's say, my manager would authorize any kind of expenditure for this. Maybe I should introduce you to him or her, and that becomes in your warm introduction. And at least then it starts conversation within that potential business that you may be selling into, or friends or contacts that you wouldn't otherwise reach.
Great, thank you. So what do you think, or what should we know that this customer discovery is going to unveil to us?
Well, it's going to unveil one of two things. And both of them are a positive. Okay, so you're going to get perspectives of the individual you're talking to. They may be appropriate, they may not be appropriate. They may lead you in a different direction. They may validate and they may not validate. But in every case, what happens is you get a better definition then of what it is that you are thinking about bringing to the marketplace. So to say that I got a negative response from this conversation, and they just said they really don't have this kind of a problem, but they have a different problem, and I really wasn't ready to address it, that's worth its weight in gold, really. The time that it took for you to find that out prevents you from going down a path that consumes your resources, your time, your money, your energy, to chase something perhaps that the market either isn't ready for, or they don't find value in it. And the bottom line is, you're trying to bring something to the marketplace that has value, and you're looking for, through customer discovery, others to say, yes, I agree with that. That is a problem for me. Okay, now at that point, you have not told them how you're going to solve the problem. That comes at a later stage.
Great. So you identified a little earlier some of the different customers. Can you elaborate on those and why I need to know who these customers are?
Absolutely. There's a very easy level to talk to, and that's the person that we call end users. Those who specifically will interact or use your product or service. They're the ones that on a daily basis generally see this. They see the value. They would love to have your solution should it eliminate those pain points for them. So those are generally people that will try to talk to you on a very technical level. They'll want to know about the features. They want to know how does this work, and all of those sort of things. And particularly if you're selling into companies where there's multiple layers, within that company, the questions will be directed more towards the actual product or solution that you have. But then there are people that we oftentimes talk about who are called influencers. So, these are people that, as you may be aware, there's a whole industry in the social media, right, of influencers, people that say, well, I use this product and I love it, and they try to convince other people, or, but even within a specific area where you're addressing your product or your service, there are going to be people that influence this. They're a little harder to find at times, but they are also ones who get maybe a sort of tangential benefit from it. So perhaps we're thinking about, let's say, someone that's at the user level, the end user level. They have a supervisor or a manager, and that person can see that, if we had a solution to this problem, our department would be very much more productive. We would be higher quality in what we do, all these sorts of things. So, those are people that can influence then the purchasing process, the whole thing that you're after, which is to gain some revenue from your product or service, but they're not having the ability or the authority to actually make that purchase. And that brings us to those people. And in small companies, it could be what we call the chief financial officer. It could be someone else. It could be the president of a small company. And those are the individuals who, after all the work that you've done to talk to potential end users, to validate that you have a great product or service that you're thinking about bringing to the marketplace, who could actually kill the whole process. And unfortunately, it happens many, many times. So you definitely want to make sure that you are talking to a person at each of these levels in the organization or the individuals that you may be selling to. So if it's a single individual who makes up his own mind and says, yes, I want to buy this, okay, great. But maybe he has a spouse or she has a spouse that says, no, we're not going to spend our money that way, because we're parents, we're young parents, and we've got lots of other things to spend our money on. Okay, good to know, right? And companies work the same way. So yes, be cognizant of the fact that there are more than just the person that gets the greatest benefit from what you do. There's a lot of others who are involved in that decision.
Peter, we have a couple questions in the chat.
Sure.
The one is, how can I avoid giving away my product idea during customer discovery, as we won't be signing NDAs with everyone we talk to?
Very good point. And you do need to protect against this. So at the stage that you're at, okay, and this is basically validating that my idea addresses a large enough segment of potential users and customers, whatever you want to term them, but people that are going to actually write you a check, give you a purchase order, buy from you, and they are the ones that we have to be looking at. And so when you're doing that, you're just really wanting them to tell you about their environment, tell you about what their responsibilities are, and how those things could be enhanced with that. Now, you get past that conversation, and now you've calculated and said, gee, the market looks like it's about this size, and I could definitely benefit from it, bringing this to market. Then it really comes down to, your opportunity then to go back to that person and then tell them more specifics. And in telling them those specifics, you would have, say, an NDA signed with them. and then start to uncover and disclose a little bit more. But you never want to give away any of the what we call the secret sauce. So something, think of it in terms of what makes your product or service so unique that someone is actually going to buy it. How do you address it differently than someone else? So always be cognizant of, because people will ask you, particularly that first level group of called the end users, they're going to ask you, well, how does this work? How are you going to address this issue for me? And you say, very politely, you'll just have to say at this point, I really and don't have it fully fleshed out yet, but I just wanted to know, is this really important to you? And as you go through that process and you move up in further customer discovery in a more mature way, then and you're ready to say, talk about your prototype, talk about your minimum viable product, as we call it, that you might introduce to the market. That's when you do sign the NDAs, have people, make sure that they're not going to compete against you. And so that does become a next level of customer discovery.
And one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you at the Startup Factory have a one sheet or customer discovery reveal interview guide? I know we don't with the Papa John Center. It's probably something good to put together, but do you have something?
We don't. And the reason we don't is that, if you look at 10 businesses, let's say, and that's in our current cohort, each of them has a different perspective on the problems or the industry or the market segment that they're trying to address. And so what you have to do at this point, because there are obviously competitors, rarely do we come across something that is so brand new that it's never been seen before. And in those cases, that's a whole different set of questions, because if you're, say, for instance, the first person to introduce, I'll date myself, but let's say you're doing compact discs, and compared to audio tapes, how are you going to do that? I mean, how would you, bring that to light? Because no one understands what that is, because it's never been invented yet. So, putting together your questions really, and your survey questions and your demographics is kind of a process that is more by feel. I mean, I know you probably don't want to hear this, because many people like to have an instant solution. Just give me a chart and I'll ask these questions. But it doesn't work that way. Think of this as a casual conversation over coffee. Tell me about your job. Tell me about some of the things that you have problems with. Tell me about what are the things that maybe consume most of your time, which you wish you could do simpler or faster or easier, whatever. That's the kind of initial customer discovery we're talking about here.
And I imagine you're even narrowing to those questions, or you're kind of specifying those questions to whatever your specific gadget is, whatever your product service is, to kind of know, not that you want to steer the conversation, but at least where you want to be going with these discovery questions, right?
Yes. That's a fine it's a fine balance between leaving the conversation to be open and free, and like you said, steering it in a direction that leads me towards some of the things that I want to find out. For instance, if you're asking someone, well, tell me about your job, tell me about something that you do and it causes you a pain point, and they hit on a pain point that sounds exactly like what was your motivation to develop your product or service, without totally focusing on that, but returning to that particular comment is really the conversational effort that you have to make in order to understand. That's not to say that you can't totally just refocus that person, But what will happen is oftentimes you may miss out on something else that is associated with what you're doing, in which case you don't know that, oh, wow, if I would have added maybe this feature or done it this way, as opposed to the way I was thinking about it, you would miss out on that type of information. So again, it's a fine dance, if you will, between you and the person that you're speaking with.
So that's where the listening skills come in.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's as they always say, in conversation, right? It's more ears than it is mouth. So you got to be listening all the time. And then as you get those bits of information, those nuggets, then you can move the direction of the conversation just ever so slightly or gently, so that you, again, don't miss out on something that you hadn't even thought about asking, but it just came out in conversation.
Sure. Great information. So this customer discovery should be taking us into our idea validation point. So I've done my 50 or so customer discovery interviews. I've done the research. What am I going to do with all this information?
So at this stage, then you need to really slice and dice the data, so to speak. You need to say, okay, how relevant is what I'm doing to the target audience that I'm, after, and how does that then translate into all the effort? And I'm not trying to scare you away, but it does take a lot of effort to develop products and services and bring them to market. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to be doing it in a way that wastes time, because it certainly takes enough time to do it in a straightforward path than it is to be wandering through the woods, so to speak. And so what I want you to think about is, where are the trends that I see in my data? Did I validate that my particular approach to the product or design is what is really needed, or are there adjustments that need to be made? Again, so it's really fine-tooth, looking through the data and making sure that all your assumptions about the problem and how you're going to solve it are appropriate. If not, then it's a great time to do the pivot. All right, and it may be a wholesale pivot. You may say, "Gosh, this is the wrong solution. I've identified a problem, but people would never use this. This is based on my customer discovery." It may drive you to do further customer discovery because maybe the data is not overwhelmingly in one direction or another. In either case, you are better off using the data to make those decisions than to keep forging ahead based on what people who are near and dear to you will say to you in words of encouragement, because that doesn't really help you. It's really, because when it comes down at the end of the day, you want to have checks from lots of people, not just your friends and family, for your product or service.
So I should be able to pull from all this customer discovery if my idea was a good idea or not.
Absolutely. If you see overwhelming trends in that data, let's hypothetically say, okay, I talked to 100 people, and 80% of them said, yes, I've uncovered a pain point that we universally have as a group. However, that group is limited to a specific age group, let's say 30 to 50. Okay, that's fine. That's good. That's all good knowledge. But let's just say that 50% on another issue say we should do it this way, and 50% think, no, the manual way of doing it is the way I'd like to, approach this particular task. Well, then you're kind of in a quandary, right? So, what do you understand about that? Do you understand that that's just because of the demographics of the people that I talk to? Some people like technology, others do not. Some like the automated way of doing things, and others don't trust it at all. What does it say to you? And so making those decisions, again, may drive you to doing further customer discovery, about that specific issue, or it may say my market segment that is really the ones that will buy from me. Should I choose to go forward with my decision on how to solve this problem, will be limited to this group. Maybe now it's only to the group from like instead of let's say 30 to 50, maybe it's now just the 40 to 50 group, or maybe it's the younger group, the 20 to 35 group, because they're used to technology and they love technology.
So after all of this investigation that I've done, excuse me, and discovery, what if I find out that the need I thought I was filling just isn't there?
Well, unfortunately, that happens. The good news is you haven't wasted a lot of your time. You haven't wasted a lot of your personal resources, and you live again to actually go forward with another idea. You know, there's a saying that you'd rather fail fast and fail often than spend all of your time, you know, working on a project that just doesn't really have any legs, so to speak. It's not going to bring you the satisfaction, both materially and as well as mentally, you know, to say that I brought something to society that helps society. You know, you don't want to do that. And that's why customer discovery is so foundational to everything that you're ever going to start. You need to have validation. You need to get out of your head and into the heads of those who potentially would be your customers.
So I have some questions on the screen that essentially that we want to be considering in reviewing the customer discovery and going into our idea validation. Is there anything else you would add to this?
Well, I see one of the comments here is about doing customer discovery at conferences, and what I will say about that is, yes, that's a target-rich source. If you go to conventions and you go to large gatherings, I had one cohort member who went on RAGBRAI and talked to everyone on RAGBRAI. Why? Because they had a common interest, right? Even though his particular product had nothing to do with you know, riding a bicycle across the state of Iowa. But the issue that I would raise, and I did raise with him, is that when you go and talk to people that are in the same venue at the same location, you have an opportunity to get groupthink. Now, if that's the only group of people that you feel that is in your target market, that's one thing. But if it's not, then be very careful that you've not limited yourself into the breadth of the opinions and the commentary that you're looking for. So that's one of the areas that I would say is important. If you've done customer discovery and you know you're saddened by the fact that your great idea that you came up with and you wrote it up on the back of a napkin and you showed it to your family and everybody got excited. Again, better to find out now than to be disappointed, you know, a year or 2 or 3 or 4 down the road when it didn't happen. Other questions, Jean, that are on the chat?
No, that's it for the chat questions right now.
Okay.
So looking at competitive advantages and disadvantages, what if, again, I go through all these steps, I find out that my product already exists on the market. My idea is a little bit better than what's out there, but it's already out there. Does this mean I should scrap it, that I don't have anything here?
No, it does not. It's not an automatic stop. In fact, this is something that you do want to know. And you'll come up with customer discovery. If someone says, I have this problem and this is the way I solve it. This is the product I use, the service that I use, and that name keeps coming up. That's certainly a valuable piece of information that you would have recorded in your notes after each conversation. And that helps you in many, many ways, because then you can go and study that particular product or service. in greater detail and find out and compare, what's different about what you have as a solution versus what is already on the market. It also tells you a lot about who's buying it and how many people are buying it. And maybe it leads you even to other products or services that you need to look at that you weren't aware of. So getting that on your radar and understanding the competitive landscape is the thing that comes out of customer discovery. What you will find is that once you start building a business, and let's just say you want to get other people on board with you who maybe have the same passion, want to move through and put forth the effort, you're going to be able to explain this to them as well. Because the more informed you are about, not only how should my product or service look and act and feel and what's the breadth of what it should cover and how much should it cost, but also who am I up against? And so how does that lead me towards decisions about marketing, about pricing, about maybe even who I sell to in terms of, well, maybe the leading solution is for big companies only, and the small, medium enterprises really don't have a solution, but they have the same problem. This would be one of those areas where you could then say, wow, that's my market, and it's much larger than I realized.
Peter, do we always have to discount our price to justify this?
Well, just remember the golden rule. The golden rule is you can never raise your price once you introduce your product. If there are competitors and your competitors are very large and established, they will generally always have the advantage when they try to keep other competitors out of the marketplace. So even though you have the proverbial better mousetrap, their ability to use economies of scale, to have already amortized, let's say, investments they made in equipment or marketing campaigns or whatever, those companies which you may be competing against, right? You need to understand who they are and how they would try to keep you out of the marketplace. But trying to go lower in price generally is a failed strategy, because at some point you, as a small entity, as a startup, as we call them, will not have those advantages of being able to buy in bulk necessarily. And so therefore you're already going to have your margins being very, very tight. Your profit margins may even be non-existent. And it's not that that isn't appropriate for a startup. It's just that you obviously cannot live on that forever. So making up on volume, that never happens. Don't try it. Even your grocery store who sells on volume sells a whole lot of things that aren't groceries at very high margins in order to keep their business alive.
Sure. So Peter, I understand you used to be a mayor of a city. Did you use customer discovery at all to help you with that aspect?
Interesting question. And yes, I was. I was a mayor for 8 years in a little town in Northwest Iowa where my business was that I was running and actually eventually owned for many years. And yes, you do use customer discovery in that regard. When city projects came along, and I had this great idea. I'll give you a wonderful example. I had this great idea one day. I said, it would be really interesting if we could actually have a better internet and better TV than what we're getting. We're out here in the hinterlands. Nobody cares about us. Mediacom charges an arm and a leg, and we get about a quarter of the number of channels they get in Des Moines. And so, I said, all right, here we go. So I talked to my city clerk and the city manager, and I said, let's poll our utility customers and find out, what's their biggest challenge, with living here in Northwest Iowa. And I was very specific about not saying we're going to bring you better TV and better internet service, right? And so eventually it happened that overwhelmingly people kept saying things like, everything from my grandkids gave me this computer which I can't use because our internet's so slow and so spotty, or to young people saying, we can't play games or chat with our friends on a regular basis because it just doesn't, there isn't enough bandwidth and it's just way too slow. So eventually we ended up putting in our own line to the internet backbone, brought fiber optic to the town. And so for a small town of 2,000 people, we had high-speed internet way before it was even a term down here in the metro. I'm very proud of that. I thought it was a very unique solution, but it was so heavily endorsed by the residents that I believe we had at the last count when I was off when I quit being mayor, was like 85% of the residents were using our service, even though they had access to the previous service through another franchise. So yes, you do it. You do use it. And again, it's that whole process of not leading people to the conclusion that you want to get them to make yourself feel good.
Great. We have a few minutes left. If there's any questions out there, we can address those for you. If you wanted to put it in chat or unmute quickly to ask your question. While we are waiting to see if any questions come in, Peter, what would you say would be the biggest mistake you're seeing, or if there's like a consistent mistake that you see of people making when they're wanting to start a business? Is there a consistent, is there like something that constantly is happening, or anything in particular that stands out to you?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to the fact that particularly with projects that if you've thought about this a long time and you've talked to people that which is a safe way to start, right? It's the safe. There's a point in which it's scary to go out and talk to a stranger about your idea, but to think that is your complete customer discovery, to base your whole next steps and investment in time and money, etc., around that is probably the biggest mistake we see. So customer discovery, we talk about in the 18 weeks that we are in the startup factory, which is again from ideation, your idea, to initial commercialization, building a business model around it, right? It doesn't mean that we've gone out and raised money from investors, etc. It's an incubator. We talk about 25 to 50 actual contacts with people. Okay, that doesn't mean that I sent out 50 emails and okay, I reached my limit, even though only 10 people responded. No, it means actually getting input back from 25 or 50 people. Now that's a very small segment and it's a very small sample of the potential market that you're looking into. So knowing that customer discovery never ends, that's number one, and that you have to have a big enough foundation, a big enough canvas of people and responses to truly feel comfortable that you should go forward. And once you do that, and you're not selling, again, this is not a selling thing. You don't want to be talking about your secret sauce. You don't want to be talking about, how much you're going to charge and all those sort of things. You just really want to know, is this market that I think I am addressing a problem for? Do they have the problem? And is there enough of them that I can make a business out of this? And before you know any of that, please don't make huge investments in prototyping and etc. If you're prototyping just to prove to yourself you can do it, that's one thing. If you're prototyping so you can show it to other people before you even know if other people want or need that particular product or service, then I would say to you, you've done it sort of backwards.
I don't see any questions coming in. So Peter, thank you very much. I'm just going to do some housekeeping notes here at the end. But if anybody has questions afterwards, please always reach out to us. We'll make sure that we can get those to Peter to get you the correct answer. So thank you very much, Peter.
You're welcome, Jean, and welcome to everyone on the call today. Again, if you feel like you have an idea, all of us at the Papa John Center are certainly committed to helping you think through it, explore it, and we have many, many programs that can help you move it forward. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Oh, wait, something came in on chat.
Okay.
Let me just check really quick. There's just thank yous. So we will be, we're recording this session, so we will get this put onto a YouTube video. Look for an email from us that will have notes from today's session. We'll send you the slides. We'll send you some cliff notes. And then if you haven't registered for next week's, please be sure to do so. It's going to be about building your A team for your company, because not everybody can do it by themselves, nor should they. So appreciate everyone's time today. Peter, again, thank you and have a great day.